Hello and welcome to a live deprogram with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri. I'm happy to be back. We are trying to get back into a regular schedule post-surgery. Everything's going great. I'm very excited about the guests that I've been speaking with lately. Just a quick announcement. I have a pre-recorded interview coming out on Wednesday. I know it's not a regular time, but I'm very excited about it, and I wanted to get it out this week. And it's with it's sort of unusual. It's not, I wouldn't say really a cultural commentator. It's an interview with an FBI whistleblower. His name is Marcus Allen, and you may recognize him from the testimony he gave before Congress in September. And it was just a very surprising conversation. And so, and I also asked him all the questions that you might want to ask someone who used to be a Fed, and he answered some of them. So I'm putting it out on Wednesday, and it's not our usual day, but it's at 2:00 Central. So I hope you'll check it out. And that's with Marcus Allen. I'm very excited about the interview today. I reached out to someone who I know a lot of you are fans of, and some of you have already sent me questions you want me to ask. He's a cultural commentator. I think he's part comedian. That's what I was saying to him beforehand. His name is Raz0rFist. He's also known as the Rageaholic, and he's been gracious enough to be with us here live today. Please welcome Mr. Fist.
Hey, that's
Hello.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for asking me.
I'm a little nervous. I'll just say that up top to get it out of the way, because I wanted to ask you this right off the bat.
Yeah,
your videos are so unique. I don't think there's anybody doing quite what you're doing.
That's one word for it.
Yes, they're and for anybody who's not familiar, you sort of do these rants. You're known as the Rageaholic, and you've been doing this for quite a time. And I wanted to ask you, is it a character that you're doing when you're, or how close is it to who you really are off screen?
It's kind of like me with the volume turned up. It's probably, as I've gone on, become more divergent from who I actually am. Mm-hmm. Right. Like probably the differences between it. So yeah, kind of a character. I look at it, you know what I look at it like is like Alice Cooper. Right. That's kind of how I look at it. Vincent Fernier is the guy who golfs all day in Phoenix, and Alice Cooper's the guy with the riding crop and the leather gloves, which I totally didn't steal or anything. So, I mean, that's kind of how I distinguish it. We're both pastors' kids, which I gather is a common backstory for people who later in life become known for a catchphrase with the F word in it.
What was he known for? My husband's gonna be so embarrassed that I don't know his catchphrase. He's a music guy, so he would be like, "What is his catchphrase?"
Oh no, my catchphrase.
Oh, yours. Sorry, I thought you said he had one too. The F
no. No, Alice Cooper's just the guy who bites the heads off chickens. That's all.
Yes. So, do you mind if I play a short clip for anybody who's not familiar?
Yeah, if we want to drive everyone in here screaming into the hills, sure, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, I'm going to start with an old one. I've got an old one and a newer one pulled up, just to show the evolution of the fist. Let's get this one going. Sorry for the delay. Here we go.
So the amazing atheist called me out this week. Funny, I had thought I heard my phone going off.
Same intro. I haven't changed it at all.
Kicked gauntlet came in response.
I do miss the Punisher standee though. There's a funny backstory to this. I wound up being featured in an article because I hate Neil deGrasse Tyson and always have. He's a plagiaristic pube. I hated him. If I could push a button and kill him, I'd push it twice. Like, I hate the guy. I despise the man. So I wind up being featured in an article on some lib website, and my tweet winds up being on there. An amazing atheist, being fundamentally talentless and lazy, just combs the article, the thing he doesn't want to do any work. So he just copies the article, and he basically winds up defaming me. And at the time, I was not back in my faith or anything, but he accuses me of being a super hardcore Christian or something. At the time, I wasn't. I had kind of fallen away. I wasn't like explicitly atheist or anything, but and in fact, I was a pastor's kid. But he basically winds up taking it all out of context. So he puts my video up there. I keep getting bombarded with comments. I can't believe that. I don't know. You believe in the creator of the heavens and the what it was, but anyway, so I had to make basically a whole video just tearing him a new a-hole. I guess harder than he did in the produce section. But anyways, yeah, so it was a whole thing. And then I wound up, as a result of that, getting invited on their podcast.
How funny.
Yeah, I debated one of them on gun control. I did a bunch of debates on the drunken peasants. So yeah, this was
like, this video is 10 years ago, just to give people an idea of how long you've been
2015, something like that. Yeah, probably thereabout.
2015.
Yeah.
I'm going to play just a little more and then I'm going to switch to the newer one.
Yeah.
Deriding Neil deGrasse Tyson for his preachiness and facial hair in fairly comedic fashion, but let's address the truly pressing concerns, according to you.
How dare you call Neil deGrasse Tyson's mustache?
Number one, you're right. That mustache isn't cheesy. It eclipses cheese. That fucking thing is sour cream. It's the kind of mustache that comes with a wah-wah pedal, assless chaps, and a pizza boy. Second off, believe it or not, given the timing, my tweet wasn't actually in response to
I forgot about that joke.
It's good. It's good. A wah-wah pedal.
You ever watch old videos of yourself and want to steal your old jokes?
No, but sometimes I see old tweets because randomly, you know how people will like something old and then you're like, I wrote that? That's great.
Yeah.
Actually, I feel that way when I read journals. Do you ever read stuff you wrote when you were younger and you're like, wow, I can't believe I figured that out and then forgot it completely?
Yes, absolutely.
Like life lessons.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I just got back in the habit, or got into the habit of prayer journaling. So I'm like, I'm kind of fascinated on how going back and reading this, it's actually gonna like age, like how, because I haven't journaled since I was like maybe in 4th grade or something. So.
Okay, wait, let's jump around just a little bit. I mean, I've got this other clip pulled up, but I can show it whenever. So as you mentioned in that old clip from 2015, you were not a believer then, even though the amazing atheist thought you were, and you could only disagree with him if you're a Christian. But you've since
the hilarious part was in my photo, my icon photo, I was wearing a Bathory shirt, which has a giant satanic goat's head on. I'm not a Satanist, I never was, but the band's a black metal band, so they're a metal band, so of course they've got all this satanic accoutrement. But I was pointing that out, and I remember there's a line in that video where I'm like, yeah, buddy, Bible studies on Wednesday. It was something like that. Right?
It's people that think in that sort of black and white. Like, if you were disagreeing with me and I'm an atheist, therefore you must be a Christian. But so since then, you have come back to your faith. Is that the correct way to characterize it?
Yeah, it was a long-running process. Actually, it was just shortly after that where I started to kind of come back to my faith a little bit. It was one of those kind of things where you just sort of fall away because life distracts you. It was a common misconception that Satan wins if you smoke crack and worship Satan, but it's not. No, he's the Lord of distraction, right? That's really what it is. So anything that distracts you from the outstretched hand of God is sort of that's a victory for Satan.
There's a quote like about idle hands, right? Or the idle hands.
And it's another misconception that Satan is a taker. No, he's a giver. He'll give you anything, but it all turns to sand when you try and hold it, right? Like, so it's sort of like distractions. It was all good stuff, getting your first job, first girlfriend, all that kind of stuff. I'd been really active in the youth group in the church. I was raised in the Church of God. And a lot of the stories I tell about missions work and volunteer work and stuff like that was in that church, right? And really shaped my view of immigration policy, right? Because I got to see the Dominican Republic firsthand. I got to see the Haiti border. I got to see Mexico. I got to go down on the street level in Tijuana and build houses for people. And
how old were you?
Gosh, I started when I was around 12.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So from 12 till well into my 20s. And then after I kind of got out of my faith a little bit, I kept doing volunteer work, but on a more secular basis. But even then, I'd sometimes link up with a youth group. Because again, it wasn't like I renounced my faith. I just sort of fell away. Like a lot of people do, which I think is actually more insidious personally than the people who they get a gambling addiction or whatever it is, right? They get embittered. Their heart gets hardened. My heart didn't get hardened. I just got distracted like a lot of people do.
Oh, that's so interesting. It was, and so how long was that period that you were sort of fallen away or distracted or down a different path? You don't view it as being separated from God. You were just kind of not walking his path for a while.
No, objectively, I was. I mean, in the Gospel of John, the root word of sin is apartness. It means like absence.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
So we tend to think of sin as like a laundry list of things we're not supposed to do. And sin really is a state. It's a state of being. It's a state of apartness. So objectively, I had fallen away. I just didn't make the conscious decision to do that, which tells you how insidious it kind of is. So I came back to it sort of in the process. Well, I guess to answer your question, it was, I don't know the exact span of time, but like, I don't know, from sometime in the mid 2000s, late 2000s to like early 20 teens, somewhere in there, right? Like, so like right around the time of this video is actually when I would have been kind of just periodically stepping back into a church and that kind of thing. And as it happened, the Church of God, the original worshiping community that I'd been a part of had kind of collapsed by then. They were one of those seeker-friendly churches, right? And but I had another spiritual discipline in my family because I'm German and being Lutheran is the law. So Lutheranism was the other thing, and there was a Lutheran community near me, and I was like, okay, I'll just walk in one day, and it was a lot more Catholic than what I was used to, but it was something that I was familiar with because I had gone to confessional Lutheran services, which is essentially a mass. Like confessional Lutheranism is basically just Catholicism without the Pope, kind of. So
that's so interesting because I've interviewed a Lutheran friend, and I'm a pretty new Christian. You should know, like probably around 2016, 2017 is when I started, God started pulling me, I would say, towards him. And, but I interviewed, I don't understand. I don't understand the different denominations. I'm still learning all this. And I interviewed a Lutheran friend and she said, we're the real Catholics. Is that
not uncommon?
Okay.
Well, Lutherans consider themselves the Western Catholic Church. They don't consider themselves to have separated. They were excommunicated. So it's like they were attempting to carry out an ecumenical dialogue, like discourse with Rome, to reform what they perceived as errors, which were corruptions. Some of them have been acknowledged by Rome later on, the selling of indulgences and whatever. And for that, they were excommunicated, but they kept holding the Mass. They kept believing that the Eucharist is the real presence of Christ. And a lot of Catholic stuff that is defined as more Catholic stuff really is in Lutheranism. And I almost converted to Roman Catholicism, but boy, the doctrine of the Pope was a problem for me. There were issues for me getting into Roman Catholicism. And I was more familiar with Lutheranism. So I sort of steeped myself in that. And I'm still sort of becoming inculcated or catechized, I guess, more accurately into that.
And so
plus, again, I'm German and it's the law.
It's the law. How long were you doing cultural commentary before that period? Like, when did you get into doing videos? And what was the origin story of, because I know you've been doing it for much longer than most people in this space.
Yeah, I tripped and fell into this line like a lot of people. Unrequited ambitions as a ballerina. No, not really. It was weird. It was like I started out I went to broadcasting school, got into radio, did talk radio really early. Pre-podcast, I had a podcast, right? So the iPods weren't a thing, and I had a podcast. So we would record a radio show, upload it as an MP3, and then people would download it and listen to it. And we called it a radio show because we didn't have
proto podcast. Yes.
It was a proto podcast. Yes, It absolutely was. And my current broadcasting partner on the Racer Force Offensive, Tactical Hobo, I know we all have retarded names. He was my broadcasting partner on that. So I was doing that out of high school. And I was real young at the time and just gradually kind of built off of that. And it was funny. I started out in political commentary all the way back in the early 2000s. Then I get on YouTube and I start reviewing, Dick Cheese 80s action movies and video games. And so every time I opine on politics, everyone's like, you should stick with what you know. Video game. It's like,
Video game.
bro, my sweet summer child, if you had any idea how long I have been in political commentary. I actually went to school for political science in order to prepare for a career in talk radio. Because, I really wanted to future-proof myself in that long-living industry.
Yeah. Wait, so politically then, how were you raised? Like, what do your politics look like? I'm sure you get called all kinds of
my
things.
politics have German subtitles.
Okay.
They come with jack boots. No, I was always pretty right-wing. Always, from the very, very beginning. I remember, probably the first election I was at all locked into was the 2000 election.
Okay.
With George W. Bush and Al Gore, and watching all of that and the obfuscation around that about the election supposedly being stolen by George W. Bush, which kind of the reverse is true. The whole situation with Florida being in 2 different time zones and them calling Florida before half of the polls in the state had been closed. That kind of thing, right? Like that's a defamatory narrative.
I don't know about this. Tell me about this, because I was a full-on leftist back then.
Yeah, a lot of people, even right-wing people, have the wrong idea about this. But basically, Dan Blather tried to steal that election for Al Gore, and they pinned it on George W. Bush trying to steal the election, which is not true. Al Gore's lawyers were throwing out tens of thousands of military ballots because they knew they were all going to go conservative. On technicalities, and yet everybody latched onto that hanging Chad narrative. And so the narrative going forward was, well, Al Gore got screwed out of that. George W. Bush didn't win that. No, he did win that election, and Al Gore did a lot to try and steal it and just didn't succeed.
Wow. Okay. Now this is something else I have to go research. There's always these things that I'm like,
I've never made a formal video about that, but every time I have to mention Al Gore, if I'm not mentioning him predicting Mount Kilimanjaro won't have ice on it by the year 2015, good one, Al. Good job, buddy. Then I have to mention the 2000 election and him literally throwing military ballots out. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you've always been kind of to the right, and then let me ask you about when the woke war. So I got interested in. I don't know. I don't even know what you would call me. A cultural commentator. I don't even know. But the reason I started speaking publicly was because of the cultural war that we found ourselves in, and leaving that world and feeling very compelled to try and explain it to my friends who I left behind, like the people on the left, trying to explain to them what was happening around us that a lot of them couldn't see at the time. And some of them still can't see. And so what was your introduction to, it's sort of like a zombie movie. I always like to find out, like, when did you realize that that the world wasn't what you thought it was? Or did you always know? Could you always see the infection?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
So one of the sort of flashpoints in the culture war is considered to be something called Gamergate. And I'm sure you've heard of it. I don't get name dropped a lot in discussions of Gamergate. I guess in some circles I do, but I get ignored at least as often. But I was pre-Gamergate. I was actually covering what was going on in a series called The Downfall of Gaming Journalism in about 2012 or so.
Wow, okay.
Pre-Gamergate, and talking about the corruption in gaming journalism and how it related to the broader culture war, having no premonition at all, by the way, that there was going to be this huge tsunami left versus right culture war coming down the pike. I was just fixating autistically, as I often do, on this one particular topic because I had worked in a lot of quarters that had brushed up against the video game industry and video game journalism. I worked at GameStop for a while. We had to sell those terrible Game Informer magazines to people, and they were so biased. And the moment Game Informer got bought by GameStop, they immediately had like more fluffy reviews. They gave everything a high score because if they give something a low score, it might not sell at GameStop, right? So you could see it immediately, like, this is not a real industry. And then Stephen Colbert jumped in defense of people like Anita Sarkeesian and on and on and on. And so it kind of blew up. It wound up being sort of a touchstone, as hilarious as it sounds. A fight over video games did kind of presage the Trump phenomenon in a long-winded way, right? But Trump is a revivification of an old phenomenon, right? An unrequited populist right in America that might even go back to like Taft and Coolidge, like way back then. But like, I think one of the first big flashpoints was Goldwater. Then you kind of had Nixon, who had a little bit of a populist element to him. But then you had the Buchanan Brigade. I mean, yeah, you had Reagan, but like the Buchanan Brigade was the real big populist movement in the early 90s. That wound up being kind of scuttled and taken down from the inside. Then the Tea Party came around. And I often call Trump the ghost of the Tea Party. Because the Tea Party started in Phoenix. The first Tea Party was at our state capitol. And it was sort of taken down from inside by its own funding. You know, once they saw it was a political threat, a bunch of kind of rhino interests moved in, funded it, and then because their money was attached, now they get to guide where it goes. And inside of a 2-year period or something, it went up like Gomorrah. It was done. And
like Occupy Wall Street on the left, kind of went down.
Very similar. Very, very similar, right? Controlled opposition is what they wanted to turn it into. I feel like that's what happened with the Bernie movement. I feel like that's what happened with Occupy, and it definitely happened with the Tea Party. And so when people say Trump is a cult of personality, you know, Cult 45 and all of that, they're obfuscating in a major way. Like, he inherited his movement. It's not about him. It's about a thing that he inherited. He was just the canniest guy in the room. I mean, he literally hired people to comb talk radio and internet forums that catered to the right just to see what Republicans were saying, like how they were decided, because he knew we hated Romney. He knew we hated McCain. He just didn't know why exactly. So he paid people to kind of tell him ahead. And we're talking all the way back in like 2012, 2013, 2014, when he's getting ready to explore the idea of running for president. So he inherited his movement. And I really think it's projection because of the cult of personality that the left arrayed around a fella by the name of Obama.
Yes.
Right. So if Obama is our messiah and the opposition is Trump, then what are the people who support Trump? Well, they can't be our religion. We're a religion. He's our messiah. So this guy must have a cult, right? It's confession through projection. I've often said those.
Like narcissists. That's
what
an interesting way of putting it. If Obama's the messiah and Trump is what they view as
he's the Antichrist.
Antichrist. Yes. Do you think Trump's a savvy guy, a smart guy? They're always calling him stupid.
Yeah, I think he's instinctual, but he's very, very intelligent. It's like a street level kind of. He has what I call applied intelligence. Like there's book intelligence. I'm sure he's got some of that. But then there's applied. Like Ben Shapiro has book intelligence. That's where you memorize a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Instinctual applied intelligence is being able to read the room and see which way you're actually supposed to go. Like that to me is actual applied. And I don't think Ben Shapiro has much of that at all. Trump has it by the ass load.
Okay, so let's back up a bit to Gamergate, the culture wars that we found ourselves in. So you were sort of doing a proto podcast. You started doing videos. You were talking about the downfall of gaming journalism in 2012 before Gamergate happened, before other people were talking about it. And then from your perspective, because I know what mine was, and mine is being from within the woke cult.
Yeah.
So I always like to get other people's perspective on what happened, because you said you didn't see this thing coming either. Like, what happened from your perspective? Explain, if you were explaining to someone in the future the years between like 2012 and 2020, those 8 years, what happened?
Yeah. There was a focal point. I think Anita's a big part of it, but more than her, it was Zoe Quinn. It was some of that stuff. It was also catching the people on the Game Journal pros. So after Zoe Quinn may or may not have exchanged sexual favors for a good game review score. That was the big controversy initially. They were caught, a bunch of game journalists were caught on a forum called Game Journal Pros, basically conspiring in unison to slant coverage against the Chuds who were opposing the Anita Sarkeesians and the Zoe Quinns, and who were talking about the stories on Kotaku, criticizing people like Stephen Totillo and Nathan Grayson and such. And there was also I'm blanking. There was a guy at Destructoid who had blown the whistle on a trans person or someone who wanted to be trans, who was going to, they had a false kind of fundraiser and used all the money they raised to pay for gender reassignment surgery without informing anyone. It was a giant scam. And they blew the whistle on that and got fired for it. That was kind of a pre-Gamergate thing. So there's like a lot of things that kind of came together all at once. It was a confluence of a lot of different factors. But I think catching them red-handed on the Game Journal Pros sort of forum had a lot to do with it.
With Gamergate.
Yes, absolutely. Alistair Pinsoff is actually the name of the guy.
There we go.
Yeah. And I think he even apologized after the fact. And the scammer was someone called Chloe Segal, if I remember correctly. Or called themselves Chloe's. That was their D&D name.
So what influence do you think that new media, cultural commentators, whatever you want to call this space, YouTube podcasters, what influence has it had on where we find ourselves today in 2025? I would say like politically and culturally.
It was pretty simple. There's been a steady, decades-long strategy of incrementalism.
Okay.
Right? Incrementalism, whatever, boiling the frog. And for decades and decades, they had this pretty tried and true strategy. It required a lot of patience, but the left were able to gain a lot of ground on some pretty ghoulish things, frankly, in retrospect. By pursuing a strategy of introducing a new element, whatever it is, if it's lesbians and gays in a TV show. Okay, you initially take a bunch of flack when you introduce them. I always use the example of Roseanne, right? Roseanne had the lesbian character Nancy, and they introduced her, and it was a big controversy. Family groups, focus on the family. They had a letter writing campaign to ABC. ABC lost a bunch of sponsors, and so they had to kind of keep Nancy in a closet, figuratively speaking, for a while. And then after it kind of died down, they reintroduced Nancy. And suddenly, like, did Focus on the Family want to go through all of that rigmarole all over again? No, they felt like they won already. So they kind of let it go. And this kind of process repeats itself enough times. And before you know, like, gosh, late 80s is Roseanne. By the late 90s, you literally have Will and Grace, which is just a full-on gay sitcom. Then you have the L Word and Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. And it was an incrementalist strategy. It's a tide coming up the rocks, basically. And this is a repeatable strategy. It requires a lot of patience, though. And I think the problem really was the left were a victim of their own success with Obama. I think a lot of people thought on the left that, like, socialism was going to inherit the earth in this country in a lot of ways. Like, they would say publicly, oh, Obama's not a socialist, you're being alarmist. But privately, I think at cocktail parties, the socialist left were kind of like, he's our guy. Like, you know that, right? Like, we're going to inherit the earth. We're getting single payer, healthcare. We're full on universal healthcare. This is happening, right? And then when he turned out to be a bit of a lame duck, like he expended all of his political capital passing Obamacare, and he was a lame duck for the remainder of his tenure, I think there was a lot of pent up anger and rage, and the left lost their patience. That's it. And so on every front of the culture war, they just went for the whole farm. All over. It was full court press on every single issue. No, you have to accept trans rights. No, cis people don't have rights. No. Your children now belong to the state. We can have gender reassignment without informing the parents. They belong to us. The patience was gone.
Immigration.
The careful incrementalist strategy that they had unfurled slowly over the course of decades, they lost any semblance of it at all. No subtlety. And I really think they became a victim of their own success with Obama.
I've never heard it put that way before. I figured it was sort of an incremental madness because they were isolating themselves more and more like a cult.
Too. That's a fair observation, right? Because in certain circles, especially in like journalism or Hollywood, or yes, even gaming, as we learned, everyone kind of goes to the same schools. Everyone attends the same parties, drinks the same wine coolers, screws the same people. It's just absolute. It's a bubble is really what it is. It's a gilded bubble. And I think a lot of people in that space, maybe Obama's emblematic of this. I said this after Trump got elected, but that meeting, I'll never forget that first meeting between Trump and Obama after Hillary lost. And you could see it on Obama's face. He had been kept in a bubble. If you know the particulars of his administration, Valerie Jarrett kept him really, really insulated from criticism for the 8 years of his presidency. If you had any bad news at all to tell Obama, she didn't let you in to talk to him. So when Hillary lost, it came as a complete shock to him. And if you watch that scene again now with that knowledge, you can read it on his face. He is clueless. He had no idea it would come to this at all.
And the same with I would say the entirety of the left in some ways, because it was cult-like, and I include myself in that bubble. We had no idea. I was one of those people who in 2016 was sobbing, like in shock. And I've since gone back and watched some of on YouTube, you can watch the reactions from the media, like Rachel Maddow and others who were just stammering. People were just absolutely didn't see it. They weren't based. Now I can look back on it and say, oh, you're not based in reality because everything you're getting is filtered in. You cut off connections, even on a small, like on a microcosm, like if you look at my world at the time, I had unfriended everyone who wasn't woke.
Yeah, this was something that the left did to themselves. They definitely they not only were insulated, they self-insulated. And I think part of that was the depersonalization process that they had to undertake in order to muscle up for the enterprise of possibly having to deny, and this is a prophecy that was realized under Biden with the Jan 6ers, of denying the right personhood and constitutional rights. In order to muscle up for that enterprise, they had to deny that personhood. So it was like they were sort of training the left in this country to just not see fully one half to over one half of the country as human beings at all.
Yes. And that's reflected in how the left talks about people who voted for Trump. That's sort of what started to shake me out of, there were several factors, but one was seeing people in my world after Trump won talking about we need to murder, basically saying we need to kill all Nazis while simultaneously calling half of the country Nazis incorrectly, like incorrectly using that word. And I was like, wait a minute, what? Like, I don't think you'd call them that. And I learned you couldn't say anything moderate like that. You couldn't question it at all. That was sort of the beginning of me starting
If it makes no sense because it fails to survive a single trip to an inner city grocery store. That view, which tells you a little something about how insulated the left are now, right? Because if you see the guy who shows up in a pickup truck with a MAGA hat on, he's not goose stepping in and he's not saying, oh, back off, queer, I'll get you. You know what I mean? Like that, all those caricatures. Those don't exist.
That's what I do when I wear mine.
Well, fair enough. I've done that on more than one occasion, but yeah. While punching a feminist repeatedly in the face. No, absolutely. So it fails to survive an encounter with reality, really. I say this about gun control. I feel like a lot of presuppositions about people who are terrified of guns on the left fails to survive a single depression of the trigger at a gun range.
Oh, yes.
Once you realize it's not a Death Star laser with pearl grips, that it's just not just annihilating half of God's creation in a single trigger pull, and you realize, oh, I'm not afraid of this. This is just a responsibility. Like this is a thing that I have to take seriously and respect. But fundamentally, it's shooting firecrackers made of metal at a target in the distance. This is not
It's a tool.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like we need to get a lot of people on the left. If they were a little more sane at present, I'd say that we need to get them guns and gun safety classes. But we've seen how that's worked out with some of the tropics they're on.
Yeah, so that was one way in which I was an anomaly when I was in the woke cult, and I was in it for about 2 decades. But I was an NRA handgun instructor in Los Angeles, and I used to take women. I was an instructor at a girls' gun club.
Wow!
And so I would take leftist women there. I was a leftist, and this was the one way in which they thought I was really weird, right? But then they would get there, and it's what you're saying. It would demystify the tool to them, and I mean, it opened. I think you're right. It opened their mind about a lot of things. Now, in retrospect, I don't know if some of those people, they've stayed leftist, but now they love guns. And I'm like,
not sure I feel about that.
I don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah.
It didn't fully get them out, but yeah, that wasn't the intention. That wasn't why I took them there back then, but still.
Right.
So I want to play this clip, the new clip, because I want to ask you some questions about where you think we are now. And before I do that, can I just thank a couple people in the chat? I think there might be some questions for you also. Super Base is here, the Deprogrammed membership fairy. Thank you so much. Good to see you. We've also got John says hello, Razor and Keri. Hello. Thank you, John. And Mario told me he was going to be here for $5. Thanks, Mario. He says Razor's always been on point, insightful on music, history, games, and on faith, and inspiration for those of the faith who lean to the creative side. Mario's not the only person I know who in sort of the Venn diagram of interest. A lot of my friends who are into metal music and Christianity were like, oh my God, I'm so excited. You're going to have Razor. So it's like the metal. There's probably some other interest.
Not a terribly large oval on the Venn diagram of interests, but yes.
Also, Andrew Knapp for $5 says, I remember the Tea Parties. Remember the Obama IRS going after them? I remember.
Yeah. Just one of the many scandals of the Obama administration that didn't exist.
I actually don't remember that. Again, I was in my little
the IRS targeted Tea Party groups, especially in the run-up to the 2012 election, which really affected Romney's fundraising in that election and probably had a big part in swaying the result of that election, in addition to Mitt Romney being Mitt Romney. Mm-hmm. But the head of the IRS, Lois Lerner, had to resign ultimately to protect Obama, really.
So it's sort of like they've always been doing this sneaky stuff that I'm aware that they do now.
Well, yeah, and that's historically pertinent because a lot of people don't even remember Nixon wasn't going to be impeached over Watergate. He was going to be impeached over using the IRS against his political enemies. That was the thing that was going to get him out of office, actually. So Obama basically impelled, seriously suggested that one of his people should fall on their sword to protect him from a Nixon-like fate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I have a question. Why can't Razor, says the Orange Man, why can't I super chat you on your streams?
Don't know. Honestly, we use Streamlabs a lot of times, and Streamlabs a lot of times has more issues than Cosmo. It's got some problems, y'all.
Streamlabs. Okay. So I want to put this one up. Now, this is a more recent, and I think I have a lot of questions about this, and we may disagree on some things, but I think we're going to agree on a lot. Let me just play this more recent one.
Stop me if you've heard this one before. Bombing occurs, breathless auguries alleging the onset of World War III abound. 48 hours later, it's all but over, and all we accomplished was give an engagement to a talentless cabal of carny influencers on the so-called right, none of whom had a damn word to say about politics prior to Trump's inauguration in 2016, and all of whom slinked silently away to Juiceburg another day. Lather, rinse, repeat.
Apparently, I'm back in time for World War III, and I hate to say that we told you so. By we, I mean me and Ian Carroll. Ian!
I just have to stop here. Wait a minute. I want to show people your fun intro because I love your intro. But let me pause there for a second.
Yeah.
I've had some people, especially some of my Facebook ladies, who are like, "What is juiceburging?" They don't see as much of it there, and they don't. I don't know if they're fully aware of what is happening in the online world if you're not on a place like Twitter. So, can you just explain?
Because I think a lot of it is artificially amplified on some of the platforms that we frequent. Really, I think. I mean, and who knows? It's kind of a cui bono situation. There's a lot of different parties that could possibly benefit. I know there are congressmen who suggested Russia and China had spent millions on boosting just basically divisive narratives. Because any narrative, think about it, any narrative that divides the right is really dividing Trump's political coalition. And that benefits them because he's the sitting president of the United States. So that's not outside the realm of possibility. It could be a lot of different parties. And it could even be some of the influencers themselves who just pay for botted engagement. We know for a fact that some of them do.
Fuentes.
Yeah, Milo blew the whistle on that loud and clear. He used to be Fuentes' manager, and he knew the names of all the sock accounts that Fuentes uses to boost his brand, and he listed them. So Milo came with receipts, gang. You could think what you want about Milo Yiannopoulos, but he didn't come to play.
He does come with receipts, and I've seen that. It's kind of crazy. Fuentes, of course, is Nick Fuentes. He's the king of the Groypers, which is this sort of modern day neo-Nazi kind of movement of young men.
He's Richard Spencer with less charisma, kind of. Is sort of what.
Yes, and more degenerate sex life, possibly. Allegedly.
I hope not. My favorite thing about Richard Spencer was he was on like a podcast debating I think it was Sargon of Akkad. Shout out to Sargon. I think he was debating Sargon of Akkad, and Richard Spencer, who's supposed to be hardcore, like white nationalist guy. We must secure the future of the white race. And he's rapping about whatever. It's the hilarious part is it's pretty universally agreed that Richard Spencer beat Sargon of Akkad in that debate. And yet halfway through the thing, Richard Spencer's going off on one of his Hitlerian jags, and all of a sudden in the background wanders a very, very brown girlfriend with what looks like afro hair. Like, what? What deep lore is this? What is this?
How much do you hold on 1 second? My dog is reacting to someone who's here. Give me 1 second.
I'm the one with the dog the size of Clifford. Oh. So everyone, how's the wife and kids? I'll answer Emperor Creatine here. He says, to think the domino that resulted in the ending of Roe v. Wade could possibly be traced back to Zoe Quinn's trip to Five Guys, burger and fries. It is interesting.
I'm so sorry about that. My neighbor came over.
No problem. No problem.
I was like, oh, honey, I can't talk to you right now.
What is it about doing a podcast that's when the package will be delivered? That's when right? Every time.
The package is fine because they'll leave, but I happen to live, and this is a blessing. I'm not complaining, but I live in a small town where neighbors will come by to borrow something or bring you chicken soup and I'm serious. Like, I live in a small town, and so I love that. But if it happens when I'm on stream, then I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, I can't do this. Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you. You were saying Richard Spencer had a girlfriend walks behind him with Nubian skin. Right. So how much do you think these guys are just fakes? Like, how much are they sincere, or are they just saying? Because I happen to think some of the people who are pushing the most evil, I would call it evil, objectively evil stuff right now online, are just sociopathic, and they'll say anything. I don't think they're actually legitimately white nationalists or this or that. They'll just put on this.
Yeah, I mean, when you see Candace Owens 1 week, like full on Zion Dawn, she's like, we've got to wipe out Palestine. Like, we've got to be, Israel's our greatest ally. And then like 2 weeks later, she's Like what? When that's like a Mussolini speech, it's like, okay, I think we've made a slight pivot here, and maybe there's some missing connective tissue between these two positions, right?
Right.
I think a lot of it though is herding behavior, and maybe this is botting. Maybe this is some of the botting that we're alluding to. And this would have to be a third party doing this. I think this is kind of a strategy, and it's an observable one, whereby you say a thing, and that's the thing that gets all the likes and all the engagement and whatever. Well, if that happens enough times, you're probably going to be saying that thing a few more times, right? Case in point, I had a friend, doesn't have a large YouTube channel, but he made a video once about the World Cup. And out of nowhere, it took off in like Argentina or something, and 1 million+ views out of nowhere. This guy had like 2,000 subscribers or something, but it just blew up. So what did he try? What did he do? He'd be crazy not to. He made a bunch of videos about the World Cup, and none of them were quite as successful or whatever. But that's just like an example of what I'm talking about here. If you made a tweet and it was against Israel or something, and that got 10 times the engagement of what you normally do, you'd probably be talking about that issue a little bit. It's just a normal kind of human condition. I'm not saying these people don't have convictions on this particular issue. Me, I'm just more so indifferent on Israel and Iran. It's the juice burger. I'm not indifferent on the juice burgery because it's just so obnoxious. And
I'm with you. I am sort of, I've lately, since the juice burgering started, I keep getting called a Zionist. I keep getting accused of being in the bag for Israel.
And it's hilarious because I've told some of the most anti-Semitic jokes in history in videos. I got videos demonetized, warnings on my channel over anti-Semitic jokes. But you know what? I wouldn't have felt comfortable telling those jokes if I sincerely thought Jews were puppet masters behind a Zionist overworld government.
Right. They were
like it wouldn't have, I wouldn't have jived or. Plus, it's a simple. When you get into particulars on certain things that they push on, it doesn't hold up to historic scrutiny. Right.
Yeah.
One of my big autistic preoccupations is the history of early Bolshevism in Russia. And that's one of their big bugaboos, too. And when I say they blatantly lie, I mean they blatantly lie. It's a complete inversion of the truth. They'll say like, oh, but Jews were overrepresented among Bolsheviks. It's like, OK, where did the Bolsheviks come from? Russian academia. Well, Russia was heavily Jewish at the time, and Jews overrepresented everyone in education. So they didn't wind up running the Bolsheviks. In fact, the most prominent Jew in the early Soviet was Leon Trotsky. And he wakes up one day with an ice pick in the back of his brainstem, courtesy of who? Joseph Stalin, who's a non-Jew. Like, so if this is a Jewish conspiracy, it's a pretty shitty one. They're pretty terrible. You know what I mean? So it's like the more you get into painstaking specifics on things in history and on the particular flashpoints that they identify as, I don't know, moments in the vast conspiracy. Again, I'm amenable to being corrected on stuff that I'm not knowledgeable enough about, but I'm knowledgeable enough on this issue to make a pretty bold declaration that this is an ahistorical stance. Maybe in some other area, there was a bunch of Jews who got together, but like in Hollywood communism, I made a bunch of videos about Hollywood communism. One of them, Hollywood was always red. And that's a classic case where the only people who went to prison for that were Jews. And the leadership, who were all Anglos, didn't ever see the inside of a prison cell. You know what I mean? Like it's an inversion of what they're saying.
Yeah.
There were more Jews there because they were being recruited because Hollywood is heavily Jewish. Why? Because of nepotism. The same way there's a whole bunch of, the same reason there were a whole bunch of black people in whatever, name the city, right? There's certain ethnic groups that tend to congregate in certain places. Heck, Phoenix is one of them for Jews, actually. Like there's quite a few Jews in Phoenix. Like I used to live near a Jewish community center, for example, and whatever. So it's, I don't know. It's the more you get into specifics, the more their narrative falls apart. So
just to describe it for people, because I'm being serious. There are people who, even in the chat, who are like, what is juice burging?
It's hard to explain. It's but basically I don't know. Do you have a better description?
I think it's what you described, but it's sort of the Jews are responsible for every ill in the world. It's if you don't see it on Facebook, it's it's very common on X lately to, in the comments, just have people, if they don't like what you're saying, to call you a Jew, to say you suck Jewish COCK,
which is funny because
being paid by Jews.
Yeah.
It's
which is funny because, you know, like I said earlier, I'm German as sin, and I'll get called Jewish just for using the word Jewsburg by a bot from India. You know what I mean?
Yes. How much of these people...
And I don't know about you, Keri, but I try to get all my white nationalist lectures from a guy whose last name is Fuentes. I don't know about you.
Fuentes.
I do what I can on that one.
Or are you familiar at all with the parts of... I've just in the past couple of years started to become familiar with the different parts of Christian Twitter. And there's a whole part of, I don't know if they're trad Christian Twitter.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. Trad, Cath, kind of. There sometimes there's a little linkage there, but I feel like the Catholicism with those guys is more of a cosplay.
Yes. Well, you don't know how right you are, because some of them it turns out they're fake. They've been exposed as being guys in India, and they're LARPing online as like trad Christian wife, and they're posting blue-eyed, blonde-haired pictures of themselves, and meanwhile they're like, their name is like Mahmoud or something.
Mahmoud.
But all they're posting is like this AI slop pictures of like pregnant women and women cooking for their husbands, and they're like, ladies, this is what we should be doing. And then they're getting thousands of retweets, and people love it. They're eating it up like, yes. Wow. So that's a whole thing. How much of it is, as you said before, you think some of it is manufactured, and there's some evidence that there are players in other countries. How much of it do you suspect is real, though? Is there a growing interest in this ideology?
Yeah, I think it's grown, but I think a lot of it is the source being false doesn't mean that people don't fall in line with it. I think that's a lot of it is kind of herd mentality. If a lot of people are walking in a particular area, and walking in that particular area wasn't socially acceptable before then, well, now you kind of have this implicit sanction to go walk in that particular area, right? That's just that's normal herd behavior. So I think in addition to kind of false engagement for making posts like this, that's what I said in the video that you just played actually about Candace is, you know, people accuse her of being like paid off or whatever. It's like, first off, she's loaded. She doesn't need any money. For how much longer that'll be after the lawsuit from Macron, I do not know. But but she's loaded. She doesn't need it. The truth is a lot more galling. She does it for free, for engagement and attention. That's really what it is, ultimately. And, you know, a lot of people are like that, especially on social media. And social media, in her defense, programs you to behave that way.
Yes. Yes, there are some people who, even if they get into it with, I can't figure it out sometimes. I'm like, were they always just phonies craving supply or whatever, craving fame, money, power? Right. Or did they get in with good intention? And then, like I saw when I used to work in comedy in Los Angeles and entertainment. And I would see people who lost themselves to those things. So there are some people with good intentions who get in, and then it just like, they just start chasing that. It's like a drug, right?
No, absolutely. It's that dopamine hit. I mean, it's potent, and I think it's observable. I think there's even been studies and such about it or whatever. But I don't think these people necessarily have to be paid off or anything. I don't think it has to be a grand conspiracy. I'm always leery of any assertion of conspiracy. Right. I'm always leery of that kind of thing. I don't think it has to be a directed conspiracy with one or two bad actors and a whole lot of paid bots, and then a whole lot of people who don't have any principles beyond whether or not their YouTube channel is growing. You can affect a lot of damage that looks like a conspiracy, but really isn't one.
Really, just a lot of bad actors.
Yeah. Plus, you know, it's pretty easy for me because most of the people who have taken this bait are people I didn't respect to begin with. Like, I never respected Tucker Carlson for a minute. I've been bashing him for years. He goes from being the bitch in a bow tie on PBS, being the designated punching bag for all the libs, to suddenly he takes a few photos holding up a trout and he's the folksy guy. It's like, aren't you like former CIA? What are we doing here? What?
I fell for him.
I
So after I came out of the woke cult, he was one of the people I started reevaluating everyone, right? And because you're in that cult, and here's a danger, a warning for people when you come out of an ideological cult, is you can't be too Pollyanna about stuff. I really was sort of like, I had all these received opinions that were not my own about, these Ben Shapiro's, anybody on the right is bad, right? Like, don't listen to them.
No, Ben Shapiro is bad. You were right.
Well, it's just a whole list, right? So then I had this
I call him Benzedrine Shapiro, actually.
Well, I went into it though with then very kind of open, like, oh, everyone on the right, I've been misguided about. Let me start listening. And he really kind of, I thought, oh, I love Tucker Carlson, actually. This is so interesting. And I think he's sincere. And then, so he really shocked me because lately my opinion on him has completely changed. So since you knew that he was a bullshit artist and Neil deGrasse Tyson's a bullshit artist, you probably have a good sense of discernment.
I guess. Just you get a feeling about it. You do enough volunteer work with homeless people and addicts, and you'll get a little sense of who the bullshitter is and who's running a game, and you get a little sense of that. So,
yeah.
I did soup kitchen stuff in Haight-Ashbury. You'll meet all kinds over there.
So tell me about how you keep, since we're talking about people who do cultural commentary and get captured by a pursuit of fame or clicks or how much your channel's growing and all that stuff. How do you ward that off? If you're a believer, you've come back to Christ, like, how do you make sure that you don't fall into that trap?
That's one of, I was talking about seeker-friendly Christianity over there. That's one of the interesting things about, like, there's kind of a rush to the pews a little bit right now with people kind of coming back to faith.
Yes.
And the most peculiar thing about it to me is it seems to skew kind of higher church than in previous manifestations. Like in the 80s and 90s, there was that seeker-friendly church explosion. And I guess in the 60s and 70s too. But like this is that was sort of like saying a bunch of people saying, what can the church do for me? And as we see from the Joel Osteen fake teeth mega churches, apparently the answer is a glorified TED talk bracketed by bad rock music. But the crop of converts now is aimed in the opposite direction. It's sort of Eastern Orthodox, Roman Catholic, high church Protestantism.
Yes. Okay.
Confessional Lutherans, Reformed. And I think that's because this generation kind of just had a World War I moment. And that was sort of the pinko pox sort of. After World War I, there's a rush to the pews. Okay. We kind of had that. We had a watershed moment, right? Like that was sort of like the pinko pox thing. Because Zoomers didn't live through 9/11. They didn't have the 9/11 moment. And that I think is kind of why this is sort of skewing in that. So it's sort of like to return to your question, sort of like we're instead now saying, what can we do as far as like liturgy for that? It's not about what it can do for us. It's about what we can do for it. That's the value I find in like the divine liturgy and more liturgical worship is it sort of takes me out of myself.
Yes.
And makes it about that thing. It's not so much performative. It gets accused of being that by some Protestants, right? But it's more about, okay, now I am going to sublimate whatever I'm about to this experience. So yeah, to answer your question, it kind of keeps you grounded. It kind of, you like that Trumpian weave I just did? I went from World War I to Eastern Orthodox.
I thought you might lose the thread for a second, but you didn't.
No.
How do you keep from falling into that pit? And so you think it's ritual, or the ritual part of?
I think it's because, I think if you stay in your faith, and if your faith is not about you but about God, that necessarily takes you. One of my favorite writers in the world, David Milch, sadly a genius that we are losing to Alzheimer's, famously said before he writes a show, he did Deadwood, NYPD Blue, whatever. He said before he writes anything, he has to make sure it's not about him. And so he basically prays to God and just says, I make myself available to the spirit that gave me rise. That's it. Like, it's not about me. So he takes himself completely ego out of it, whatever.
Interesting.
He refuses to even type the script himself. He sits on the floor and he dictates it to somebody else, and they do it. As much as possible, he's trying to take himself out of the creative process.
Yes.
Right. So in that, so that to me is kind of an exemplar.
Do you do a prayer like that? Have you? I used to do prayers like that before every pod. I've switched the prayers I do now, but back when I first started podcasting, this was like maybe 2017 or so. I was so nervous about being on camera. I actually don't like what do you call it? I have a fear of public speaking. You wouldn't know it because I've gotten over it.
Podcaster, is that right?
I know, but I did. And so, but the prayer I would do was like, take me out of this and just help me say words that are pleasing. And my atheist friend was like, well, you're basically just tricking your brain. And, you know, I know there's an atheist interpretation for what was happening, but it worked. And it also, it was sort of like a kill my ego prayer for like 2 straight years. I did that prayer. I have a different one now. But I had never heard that about, that's the Deadwood creator you said would do something like that, like wanting to take himself out of it.
Yeah, completely. And the result was pretty genius. And actually, Deadwood, as many F-bombs and boobs as are in that, it is a surprisingly Christian show.
It is. I just watched, my husband and we're like very late to that show. You're a fan of it?
Oh, I think it's a work of genius.
It is. And so we're like, I don't know, 15 years too late to get angry about the fact that it was canceled. I don't know how old it is. We're like, what happened? You know?
I got into it right on the 3rd season when it was canceled.
Oh no.
Pissed me off to no end. But it wound up being an inspiration for my own Western, which is spiritual and whatever. And the process of making that is definitely one of the inciting incidents that made me more demonstrative in my faith. Like that.
Wait, your own Western. I don't know about this. Tell me.
Oh, Ghost of the Badlands. You can see it back there. Actually, it's actually a graphic novel, and it's it's essentially an allegorical Western that's essentially like a Western retelling of sort of the conversion of the Apostle Paul, sort of.
And where can people buy
it? You can buy it on Amazon. You can get it anywhere, color or black and white. Yes.
Ghost of the Badlands.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a copy. I'm excited.
Yeah, when I was writing it, I thought I was just going to do a Western, and it was the spookiest thing ever. Me and an artist had been just kind of flirting with the idea of doing a Western. And he was going to have to move on to another project. And so he just drops me a line like, hey, dude, like I'm between projects. So if you want to do this thing with me, we got to do it right now. Right. So I'm like, oh, crap, say less. So I hadn't written the script yet. So I sat down and I started writing. And again, I have no prompt except I have a vague idea of what I want to do, not religious, and it's going to be a Western. And as I'm writing this, it gets churchier and churchier, and before long it's opening with a quote from a founder of the Church of God, and it becomes an allegory for the conversion on the road to Damascus. I was like working out my return to faith basically while writing it, and it became full on religiously themed work. So doing that, I necessarily, as I was promoting it, had to kind of warn people, really. Like, my previous work has not been this Christian. So it's just this side of a Christian comic. So, buyer beware, just in case, right? So in the process of that, I got a lot of questions about it. And that was how I became more demonstrative in talking about it.
That's I'm posting the link right now, or if a mod wants to drop it in the chat, I'll make it. I'll do this too. There it is. I'm very excited because, well, it's a lot of overlapping interests. I love Westerns. Obviously, this resonates with me because I find that, did you feel that you were compelled? Like you're like, I'm going to write about this. And God's like, no, you're not.
No, it was the spookiest thing ever. I had to stop myself from finishing it the first night, the entire script in one sitting. And this is a I think the original script was 60 something pages. Like, it's not a short thing. And it wound up being even longer. And it was just, it wrote itself objectively. Like, it wrote itself.
Yes.
It was the easiest thing I've ever written in my entire life. And when I was done with it, I was like, how did that happen? Like, I had a vague memory of adding this line here and that line there, but it was like I almost had a creative amnesia afterward of writing it. I'm not even kidding. So I really think I allowed myself to be taken out of the process a little bit, and it made it a lot better.
Do you know the book, The War of Art? Not The Art of War, but The War of Art?
No.
Okay, so he kind of
talks
about... Was
it by Tzu Sun, or...
No. The War of Art, I forget the author's name. Maybe someone in the chat knows, but at the beginning, he kind of talks about being a vessel for something supernatural, if you believe in God, being a vessel for God, or being, like some people think Mozart, for example, was sort of a channeling God in his music, like the voice of, if you've seen that movie, Amadeus. Have you seen that movie? I thought you would love. Okay. Yeah. What a great movie, right? So the way Salieri calls him the voice of God, but he's sort of being channeled. And creatively, I think writers or musicians or some different kind of creative artists, when they're being used in that way, it's sort of that experience of, I've heard people describe it that way. I didn't feel like I was writing it all. Like you said, it almost poured out of me in one night.
Right.
And then
I had to stop myself halfway through and finish it the next night, because I was like, I've sat here and I could finish this right now, but I want to keep it fresh. Right. So I stopped right in the middle of a sentence so that I would have something to pick up off of. And then I came back to it the next day and just hit the ground running. And again, it wrote itself. I could have finished the whole thing in one night.
And it's not always like that. Tell me about when you're struggling and you're like, I just can't.
Oh, please. My second book, Death Mask, which turned out really good. I was really happy with how it turned out. It became a completely different story. I started out, I had the complete thing written, and I go back and add a subplot that turns into the main plot and over half of the book and the title of the book, right? But it wound up being good. It worked out, but that's a classic case of you just never know what turn writing is going to take ever.
Yeah. Or what the process is if it's going to be a struggle or if it's going to pour out.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't call it a struggle, but the worst thing you can do is avoid confronting a problem that you have narratively or whatever. Like, if you have to, just cut the darn thing out, right? If you're having a problem, that's 9 times out of 10, that's the appropriate solution. But just don't stop. The best writing advice I ever give is just write until you're done, then go back and fix it.
Yes. Get it all on the page. Okay, so here's the link if you guys want to go check out Ghost of the Badlands. What did you call Trump earlier? The ghost of the Tea Party?
The ghost of Tea Party's past, yes.
That should be your next book. There we go, Ghost of the Badlands. There are some people in the chat saying it's got beautiful artwork.
Yeah.
I can't wait to
George
check
Alexopoulos did the artwork, and he did career work. I don't think his artwork has ever looked as good as in this book.
Okay, I've got a couple, let's see, couple questions here or people to thank. Emperor Creatine for $5. Thank you. Says, to think the domino that resulted in the ending of Roe v. Wade could possibly be traced back to Zoe Quinn's trip to Five Guys Burgers and Fries. What?
Yeah, the Five Guys thing is a meme from Gamergate.
Okay.
Have you heard it?
No.
Okay, so I mentioned she may have exchanged sexual favors for a good score for her game or whatever. That was with a guy named Nathan Grayson. But it didn't stop there. She basically had been run through by like half of the game devs in that whole circle of people, basically. So at the final tally, as decided by, gosh, who did that? Was it Internet Aristocrat? Was it Mr. Medicare? I think it was Mr. Medicare. Was Five Guys. It was Five Guys Burgers and Fries. Yes. So it became a meme.
And it ended in, hey, Trump's president. 2020.
Yes.
We've also got, let's see, The Dark Side Would Love for $5. Hi, Keri. I love your hats. Raz0rFist. Welcome to the show. I miss you on other streams. I'm here to be offended. Hell Simcast, Hell FNT, and Hell Raz0rFist.
Godspeed. I was on Friday Night Tights not too long ago.
I love those guys. That makes me happy. Okay. And then we've also got Eric the Red for $5. Says, hi, Razor. First time, long time. Where do you get your ideas from?
That's my favorite Norm Macdonald running joke. Hey, where do you get your ideas from?
Oh, God bless Norm Macdonald.
Oh, God bless. It's not, comedy is not the same since his death.
It's not the same. And he's so, he makes me smile even in meme form. Like lately, there's this one meme I keep seeing whenever there's a terrible, because there's so many terrible fake people online. And then I'll see somebody post a meme of Norm Macdonald and it's like, hey, I know this is going to sound bad, but I feel like everybody in this thread should die.
Yes. I love this exchange he had on his podcast with some British comedian. And he's like, you know what a cis male is? It's like, no, I don't know what a cis male. This must have been right when cis was first becoming a thing. Because this podcast is like 2011 or something like that. And he's like, a cis male is someone who's born a man and then decides to live as a man. This is a cis male. And the guy's like, I don't understand. Is this a new thing? Can you explain this to me? And Norm's like, yeah, it's just it's a way of marginalizing a normal person.
Perfect. There you go. He was a real one. Okay.
Yes.
And then Legalize Adulthood. Thanks for showing up and thanks for the very generous super chat. He says, hell, Keri, hell, Raz0rFist, Godspeed.
Yep.
Look, earlier people were like juiceburging. No, juiceburger.
We gotta open a restaurant together now. Welcome to Juice Burger. Don't ask what's in the oven.
Oh no. You're paid by the Jews, obviously.
Yeah. Clearly, yes.
Okay, I want to
by how little money I have.
Right. I'm like, who is this guy Mossad? Because everybody says that he's paying me.
Well.
Okay, I
I
want to play
for mayor of New York, actually. Oh no!
I'm returning to this just because I have to show your opening. I love it so much, and then a little bit of your commentary here.
I mean, it's incredible, and it's looking like we may be going to war. Yeah. Which either I had a crystal ball, you had a crystal ball, could see into the future, or this has been the most obvious and the most planned war.
Yeah. And we're not the only one. A lot of people saw it coming. Like. Yeah. It was clearly the agenda.
As is often the case in our current news cycles, as you were talking, the president just posted on Truth Social moments ago saying, quote, a ceasefire has been, quote, fully agreed to by Israel and Iran.
I think that Trump would be very easily swayed to think all you need to do is show him some intelligence reports, show him like some spooky stuff about Iran's stockpile of like almost nuclear material and be like, look, they almost have a bomb.
So I trust Tucker beyond, more than any person in politics.
There will be a complete and total ceasefire 6 hours from now. Again, this just happened. I don't want to spring this on you. And we're trying to figure out exactly what it means. It's a rather lengthy post on Truth Social.
The MAGA movement is going to change, okay?
Yeah, Trump is on the edge right now. He's ready to burn his entire legacy to the ground because everything was laid out for him. All he had to do was close the border, deport a bunch of people, and not go to war. And so far, it's failing on all three counts and actually going to the wars we didn't want. And like, it's really sad.
Well, it follows exactly what I was saying. Trump is now clearly trying to transition from war maker to peacemaker.
This is going to be the other one, the Candace is right jar. But I'm not, it's not even that I'm right, just paying attention. I'm just paying attention to stuff.
And now there's trouble in paradise over there with
the people I feel the worst for, and I probably shouldn't, are the pundits who reserve judgment for a day or more, only to finally grab ankle and jump into the anti-Trump rage wank at a little more than peer pressure, all for the privilege of looking ridiculous. I hate to spoil this for you, sunshine, but you have no peers on social media. This entire platform.
You have so much energy. So how many takes do you have to do when you cut these?
It depends on the thing. I keep it pretty loose. Like I have a bullet point outline, which helps me kind of be extemporaneous a little bit, and that cuts down on errors. Honestly, if I had a script or something, I would definitely have way more takes. Sometimes I'll really struggle with a particular one though, because I'll go off on a jag and it just kind of won't bear fruit, right? That's usually when I have to do other takes. But you know, it's tough because I hate jump cuts. I hate edits. So I want it all to be one thing. And when I have a lot of takes, it's because I'm being a perfectionist ass at it. It's OCD's kicking in. And I'm doing good takes over and over and over again.
Right.
Yeah.
You not having lots of jump cuts also sets you apart because it's sort of that's the style I think that people are really,
I can't believe jump cuts are still the prevailing style, but apparently people who decided to make speaking in front of people a vocation didn't think public speaking classes or communications classes would be to their benefit. They're like $200 at a community college, people. Jeez, just go take them.
Well, also now with AI, I think at some point they'll be able just to have AI do it for them.
Oh yes, one day soon. It's not happening in large numbers now. No, certainly not. Perish the thought.
Just input the way you look, and then be like, "Put me on screen saying something about this."
Yeah.
So tell me about. You were saying something. You were saying something over that. And I'm sorry I didn't pause it right away, but you said there's something going on now with this with Candace Owens. Is that what you were saying?
Oh yeah, Trouble in Paradise now because she's feuding with Fuentes, and I think the out of work porn actor there took Fuentes' side. Sorry, he's not an out of work porn actor. Out of work porn actors bring people pleasure, but no, yes, I believe he stabbed Candace in the back, and it's a whole days of our Juicebergs. It's whatever. It's like sands through the hourglass.
Do you catch any flack for mocking these people and for I think correctly identifying what they are? Do you catch any? Yeah.
I always did whenever I took a shit on someone. I don't care. I mean, my goodness.
Why?
Look, I've been criticizing Ben Shapiro since he came on the scene, and because I wasn't afraid to take the slings and arrows for that. When he says something stupid now, I get to stand on principle and say, hey, I was always criticizing him, right? The same thing for South Park. I never thought South Park was funny. I always thought it was a dumb show. And now that they're unfunny and kind of doing the lame played out Trump thing, that's basically just them copying their Saddam Hussein thing, I get to be the one guy who doesn't look like a bitter prick who's just defending Daddy Trump when I say, hey, that wasn't funny. That wasn't very good at all.
And
you know what I mean?
For a while.
It's important to say what you mean when it's not popular to say it. Now, it sucks because I'm kind of caught in this cycle where I say a thing 5 or 6 years early, and by the time everybody else agrees that it's the truth, I kind of afraid everyone's sort of repeating things I said years ago, and I sort of don't get mentioned. But whatever, you know what I mean? It's more important to be correct and to actually tell the truth to your audience.
I have a friend like that. Conceptual James Lindsay on X.
He's everyone's favorite person online. Yes.
I don't know what you think about him, but I think he's pretty right on about a lot of things, and he's usually very early, and he takes a lot of crap for it, and then later people come around. That's my opinion anyway.
I don't think it's a coincidence that what's his big bugaboo is his big claim to fame is that he in discussing the current woke revolt or whatever, he consults the source material. He goes and reads the original communist texts line by line to his audience. He has these long dissertations where he just breaks down the Communist Manifesto or Georg Lukács or whoever it is, right? And he'll go line by line and say, hey, like, look, this is a parallel to what Antifa's doing. Hey, this is a parallel, but it's probably not coincidental that he's identifying the same problems with the Juiceberg's interpretation of communist history. Because all he does, literally all he does, is talk about early communist history.
Yeah.
And the Duisberg assessment of current events cannot survive a single encounter with history.
It's interesting because a lot of the people who hate him are the ones who say they're just noticing, but I don't think they're noticing anything. I think they're actually just repeating stuff they're hearing from crazy Duisberger conspiracy theorists. But what he actually does, it reminds me of a pattern maker. Like, he's noticing patterns throughout history.
Yeah, the fallacy is, I call it, it's an unfalsifiable premise, right? It's a conclusion that's looking for evidence of itself. It's kind of like the people who they meet someone and they don't like them within 3 seconds. They haven't even exchanged a single word, and then it's almost like they work backward to figure out why they hate them. Right? Yes. It's that kind of thing. Like, okay, now how can I figure out how this is fault?
It's Jonathan Haidt's In the Righteous Mind. Have you read that book? He talks about how we all mostly make our opinions. We come up with what we think with our emotional mind, and then we try and rationalize it. And he says our mind is like a rider on an elephant, and the rider is our rational mind, and the elephant is the emotional mind. And we like to think that the rider is in control, but actually the elephant is in control and taking the rider wherever he wants to go, you know? Sure. And that really made me rethink like the way I come to my opinions, and sort of like how much of it is that gut instinctual thing.
Rare is the person who can take a previously held position and completely reverse on it just because of countervailing facts.
Right.
It's important to be able to change our minds. That's the thing I worry about with the stratification that's going on, is it's sort of anathema now in order to actually have that position, to take the opposite side, like to flip. Like if Candace Owens, right? Like, can you imagine if like tomorrow Nick Fuentes said he was a Zionist or something? You know what I mean? Like that would not be treated very well, right? You're not allowed to, and you could apply it to anything, right? Anything at all, whatever position you had, you're going to be judged by whatever the express. And I've definitely taken positions that I was dead wrong on, or have modified my position on, like over the years. And I think that's important to be like frank and forward about those things when you catch them. Right.
Do you see some of this online with the people who come to Christ sort of late in life? I mean, I did. Have you seen this with people? I'm thinking of the porn star Nala. Everybody was kind of jumping down her throat, and
I didn't know what was going. I didn't know what was going on with all that. I always try and I kind of look at it like Blair White, who I'm not the biggest fan of, but Blair White came out and said, "I think I'm coming to Christ," and I'm like, okay, you're trans, but you know what? You have to show grace.
Praise God.
You have to, the first faltering steps are still steps. So you have to acknowledge that they're being taken, and you have to pray for them and hope that they're going to get there, right? It's important to have that. And so I kind of looked at that situation similarly with Nala, whatever. I just remembered that whole thing. And people were running her down, right? Because they were claiming it was all a grift, and look, she's appearing on this podcast.
Yeah, like as if it's impossible to change your mind or come to Christ or change who you are, or as if redemption's impossible.
Not only that, but how many female porn stars have come to Christ after? Quite a few. There's Love Always Ministries. Brittany Delamora's a former porn star, and she's in ministry now. Like this has been happening for years.
Huh. Okay.
I don't know why this particular person. I think it was mostly because there's a latent envy whenever somebody winds up on a bunch of different podcasts and blows up a lot at a particular time. I think that there's an envy element to that too.
Right. Well, Raz0rFist, I'm very happy that you decided to join us here today, that you graced us with your time and your wisdom. And I felt like I got to know you a little bit better, and I hope the audience did as well. I wanted to ask you, maybe in closing, if sometimes I get questions from people who say that they're having trouble staying positive in a black-pilled world, or in a place of chaos, or people who look around at the world around us and maybe are tempted to think that we live in more chaotic times than other people, which I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think people have always lived in chaos. So what are some words of advice that you can give for how to maintain joy and humor in times of chaos?
Historical education is very instructive in this, right? Whenever I remember during COVID and all the rioting and Summer of Love and stuff, and people are like, this has never happened before. This is never. Okay, we had a pandemic during World War I. We locked down. We did the whole thing. That happened then. We had the social destabilization during the 1960s, which 60s were probably still the most unstable period in the 20th century for Americans. You know, once you actually compare this to previous situations, we actually have it pretty good. What's the big difference in the big curveball that's been thrown into the mix really is the internet and connectivity and how rapidly it spreads. You know, in the 60s, the destabilization happened at a snail's pace, frankly. Right. And that even was the culmination of decades of, they called the 1930s the red decade. Right. So 30 years later, those chickens come home to roost. Like, it took a while for them to build to the 1960s. Nowadays, that can happen in a week or two. Right. That's the really alarming element. But the truth is, the touch grass meme exists for a reason. You need to get out into the world and talk to normal people. You do need to disconnect. You do need to take, and I think the biggest thing that people really, really, really need to do is do something that you have to commit 100% of your attention on and can't touch your phone once. Whatever that is, reading a book, watching a movie, something like that, being away from a screen. Honestly, it's incredibly helpful. It's crazy. And having some kind of creative outlet at the same time is massively helpful. But you know what? More than anything, steer into the black pill, if that makes sense. The thing that you're concerned about, and instead of thinking of it in vague and ominous terms, analyze it categorically as it presents itself. Because the more specific you get on that, the less alarming it's going to seem, right? That's always the way that I've had to tackle these things. I remember there's a great Tolkien quote, J.R.R. Tolkien, and this is a guy who knew something about specifics, is the broadest and most universal truths are communicated through painstaking specifics. Right? And if you look at The Lord of the Rings, that's how he wrote that book, right? It's this huge, broad epic or whatever, but it's comprised of these tiny little details. And that's what gives it its oomph, right? So if you analyze a problem in a detailed fashion and really compare it against previous documented historical examples, you'll not only see that it's not unprecedented, but you'll see that there might have been a solution and there might be one in the offing now. That's people think, you know, from the name Rageaholic or whatever, that I'm some natural black pillar. No, I did a whole video called Body Bags for Black Pills. I hate the phenomenon, and I'm a natural cockeyed optimist, to be honest.
I feel like you sometimes, in order to be white pilled or God pilled, you have to go through that black pilled stage first. It's like that Wendell Berry poem about being joyful, even though you know all the facts, like you are aware of everything. You're based in reality. You can see the darkness.
A.W. Tozer he struggled mightily with depression.
A.W. Tozer, I don't know him.
Famous pastor and theologian, kind of died in the early 60s, I think. And great preacher and whatever, great writings, but he isolated himself. And he wrote Ad Astra about how often when we come back to Christ, that's when we have our blackest depression, because that is when we feel our inadequacy the most keenly. That's the moment when we acknowledge the moral and ethical imperative above ourselves and see how distant we actually are from it. And so that's like a natural thing. You kind of have to steer into that. You have to confront that. And then you have to modify your ways. Look, I'm coming from a Lutheran background. Lutheranism is very much people think it's happy-go-lucky or whatever, but no, every Lutheran sermon is law and then gospel, right? It's here's all the ways you are failing. And then, oh, hey, by the way, Jesus Christ died for you and you're delivered from that. And through baptism, you're regenerated, you've been chosen and all of that. So it's law and gospel. You cannot have the real weight of the gospel, I don't think, without confronting the law. And often that entails a darksome depression.
Yes. It's the truth and love.
Yeah.
There's two different parts. It's like, and my pastor talks a lot about how people, you can tilt too far in one direction and then you're missing it. You're if you're too much legality and you're missing God's love, or if you're too much about God's love, then you're like these woke churches that are just
you're
like,
either the woke churches or you're like a prosperity gospel kind of, like I said, the Joel Osteen fake teeth churches, that whole thing, the TED Talks, and that's no good. That's no good. I think it's good. I worry that this current turn back toward faith for a lot of people is just following a social trend, but you know what? It's a welcome one at the same time. There was, like I said, there was a social trend of this after World War I. People basically stared into the abyss in World War I, because World War I in a lot of ways was more brutal than II. It wasn't quite as deadly, but it was worse in a lot of ways, right? And so people came back from that just having witnessed all of hell unleashed, and it was like they were shaken to their foundation in all of the institutions, in all the worldly leaders and whatever, and the only institutions left standing were the church. I think that probably accounts, by the way, for why people are more drawn to the high churches right now. Because, it's like the world around us, the carnal world, all of the credibility of the institutions is collapsing. So why would I walk into a church where the preacher is some lady in a rainbow robe and there's more trans flags than crosses, and I get the gospel of the world spat back at me? It's like, I walked in here to escape this crap. What am I doing in here, right? Like,
Raz0rFist, you are articulating exactly, I think, the experience of a lot of people who have come to Christ late in life. 100%. When I left the woke world, and first of all, I never thought it was so cringe to me that I even would go to a church. But
it's an awkward. Oh, I want to hear your story. I want to hear your story about the first time you went back into one, because it's a moment. It's a huge hurdle socially to get it. Because think about it. It's a weird thing when you really, really analyze it. I'm going to go to a building with a bunch of strangers, and we're all going to face the front and listen to a guy talk that we have never met. And it's not like it's a concert. It's a really, really weird thing
about a God that I don't know if he really exists, because you're at that phase where, and I've always been like, I had been so anti-Christian for so long, and then to be there at a church but I guess my point is also though, things got bad enough. I could see the dark so clearly that I had to look for the light, and I was that desperate for God, for truth. At the time it was like, this was the last thing. The one thing that I wouldn't try was God. I tried everything else. That was like, okay, I'm going to try this. And then what you're saying is, I had people, once they found out in my leftist world that, oh my gosh, you're going to church. I had people who were recommending these woke churches to me. And I'm like, no, are you for real? Like that's exactly what I'm looking to get away. I'm looking for something that has roots,
right?
That has a foundation, like truth.
Yeah.
It's not, how did you describe it? The woman in the rainbow robes.
Right. It's a cathedral to carnality, really, is what it is. And shoot, I'm Lutheran. The biggest Lutheran denomination is the ELCA, and they're the ones that every time you see some woke story, Lutheran pastor says forcible transition surgery for children is God's law, some goofy nonsense, that's ELCA, right? And they don't even adhere to the Lutheran confessions. Like they're not even Christian, let alone Lutheran. Let's be real. And it seems like every denomination of Christianity, Lutheranism is not unique in this regard. They all have this.
They all have this.
All do. Catholicism's got the Jesuits and on and on and on. There's even some problems in the Orthodox Church, believe it or not, in certain quarters. So, I think there's been a lot of people who have decided, hey, I'm going to go somewhere. It's not going to be about myself. It's going to be something with a foundation. And they walk in and they see a foundation built on sand. They hear the gospel of the world. They hear the gospel of carnality spat back at them. And they're like, what is this? I could have gone to, a shooting of the Colbert show and gotten the same thing. You know what I mean? It's just terrible. So
yeah, leftist church. That's it's exactly a Colbert show, a taping. Yeah. Okay, I told you at the beginning, I was going to ask you, what is your quest?
I seek the Grail. No, honestly, I don't know. With my channel, who even knows, right? I always just kind of did it to entertain myself at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But I guess at present, it's attempting to find a way to conform to God's plan in a way that isn't about me. Right. Yeah. That's difficult. And it's difficult in a lot of ways talking about your faith, because it's difficult to do it without feeling like your own problems and your peccadillos and whatever are polluting it. That's one of the things I found so comforting in Martin Luther's large catechism, actually, is there's this lengthy aside where he's talking about the Eucharist and the dispensation of, whether or not it is sacred for the sacraments to be dispensed by someone who's a heathen, right? Can you still partake in the Eucharist? And he asserts firmly that actually, yes, even if the priest was some horrible priest or whatever, still the words of institution would make clear that it's a gift of God, and you could still receive salvation through that. In other words, it's kind of a message on flawed messengers, okay, right? That like, if it's either the work of God or it's our work. So if God is decided that this corrupt messenger is going to dispense the sacraments, then they're the sacraments, right? It's not about us at the end of the day. And that's probably the most interesting thing about this kind of, I don't know, if it's a spiritual war, whatever you want to call it, this kind of return, this rush to the pews, is it's more about what you can do for God than the other way around. Mm-hmm. And that was not how Christianity worked in like the 80s. 90s, early 2000s.
Prosperity.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah. Well, it has been just a pleasure to have you here today. Tell people where they can find you and if what you're excited about that's coming up, either in your life or on your channel or in life in general.
The internet is where you can find me. X.com/Raz0rFist with a 0, because some porn photographer was named Raz0rFist. YouTube.com/@the Rageaholic. I think that's how it works now. I think it's the little @ symbol. Mm-hmm. @ the Rageaholic is how they do it now. And pretty much anywhere books are sold is where you can find me. I am working on a new volume of the comic I mentioned, Ghost of the Badlands. I'm going to be coming out with, I love film noir. I love old movies. So I do a series called Film Noir Archives, and I'm going to be doing a series of videos on that, getting back into that. And I got a video game review coming out and like a bunch of stuff. I haven't had a video out in a couple of weeks because I've been working really hard on projects that are more involved than just the normal rants. Cool. But there will be rants. I will never stop. I'll be ranting on my way into the grave. Be like, can you believe the size of this damn coffin? What is this bullshit? What is this, spruce?
I've got a question here for you. I forgot. I'm so sorry, guys. I didn't mean to. I have two people I have to thank. And also somebody wanted to know, are Raz0rFist aviators in fact red?
They are.
They are? Okay.
They are.
Answered. And then G-Man, thank you, G-Man, for $5, says, what's the deal with Tucker Carlson? Haven't been paying close attention to him. Is he spouting nonsense? Look, in my opinion, yes. Here's
the tricky bit about Tucker. He's not spouting the nonsense. What he does is when he wants to move a narrative forward, he has some other barking loon on to say the thing he wants to say, but he doesn't want to sacrifice his credibility to say it. And it's a really insincere and cynical tactic, and probably one of the douchiest things I've seen in the last several years, really.
Yes. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
100% agreement. Emperor Creatine for $5 says, still waiting for Ian Carroll to dump the evidence that he totally has that RFK's compromised. It's been what, 7 months?
What was that? Like April or something?
Right?
February? What was that?
You've got to do one about, he's got the mustache that you were making fun of in that old video. He's got the porn mustache.
He does have the cheesy porn stash. He absolutely does. I found that so quaint. Guys, Israel's got blackmail on RFK Jr. It's like, when he was going to be appointed the health secretary or whatever, they were talking about him banging preteens and freaking doing blow and smack and hitting women. And like, what was the blackmail? What is he, a supervillain? How are you going to raise the bar on that?
He's like, trust me, it's coming. And then he's like, trust me, World War III, it's here. Yeah. Trust me.
It's coming.
Okay, Mr.
All
Ian.
over that mustache. Sorry, did I?
Oh, no. No, too far. Final. I'd be remiss if I didn't read my husband's question. My husband's here. Mr. Anthony Music. Did Mr. Fist watch the Turin Shroud interview on Tucker's show? I didn't watch it. Did you?
No, I've always been fascinated by the Shroud of Turin, but I don't know what to make of it quite. Because, I mean, it's gone back and forth. I remember in the 90s, Unsolved Mysteries did a video on it, or a little, like, report on it. And every now and then, 2020 would do some expose on the Shroud of Turin. For a while there, they figured they had the fabric aged to, like, the medieval period. So it couldn't be the Shroud of Turin. But I guess there's been recent stuff.
That's what he was telling me. Yeah, he said that one's worth watching.
Yeah, I mean, I'll listen to it. I'm always fascinated by it.
Yeah, he said the interview with that dude was good. But
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Fist. I hope you have a blessed day. This is the thing we say in Texas. I know some people don't like it. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you for being here with us on Deprogrammed.
Oh, bless your heart.
That is a Southern expression. That doesn't mean good things.
Godspeed. Thank you for having me.
Godspeed. Thank you.
Yeah.